How's it going? It's Ryan here from twinbrush, and in this short video, or as short as I can possibly make it, I'm going to introduce you to the dual lighting gel photography Photoshop action. And it should be pretty simple. There's a few tips and tricks that I just want to go through, and a few little hints and settings that I've found work best for running this action. So bear with me and we'll just get stuck in. So first thing we have here is the image that we want to work on. Now I would recommend a pretty large image. You're talking something in around 3000 pixels along the smallest dimension. I'll just double check what this one is. So their yard's about 3,500 pixels wide by the same tall, and that seems to work pretty well for this. The other thing that you'll want to bear in mind is that every single image that you use is going to have a very different outcome. Okay, so you will have to test this like most actions. Some images just work better than others. Um, the example you're seeing in front of you is the typical one that I've used for the vast majority of the previews, and it's the type of image that seems to really work the best. It's not overly bright. It's got a bit of contrast there, but the blacks aren't, they're not completely black, and the highlights aren't really bleached out white. It's not high contrast. As I say, there is contrast there, but it's slightly more subdued, and the overall tone of the image is quite dark. So that seems to work really well. And what also seems to work is, if you look at this image, there is lighting coming from both sides to begin with, which also helps. Now, that last part's absolutely not an essential. You can have light coming in just from one side, from straight on. Just try it out and see. But this type of image just fits the bill really well. So that's all the kind of techie stuff out of the road. The first thing you're going to want to do is we need to load up the actions, and there's also a set of gradients that come along with the action set as well. So the first thing to do is we're going to have to load up the actions. Now you'll notice in my version of Photoshop that I'm running here, along with it being a fairly crap resolution, and the color tone's not great on this laptop either, so excuse that. But you'll notice I have the actions panel docked over beside the layers panel, and that's it there, the play button, just in case you don't know. If you don't have that on yours, up to window and down to actions, and that'll open up your actions panel. Okay, I'm just going to collapse those. As you'll see, I have them loaded already, but if you don't, what you do is once you've got the action panels open, up to the menu in the top right hand corner, click on that and the flyout will appear. Scroll down to load actions, click on it, and then navigate to wherever you extracted the zip folder whenever you downloaded it, and you'll have to click on each one and load it individually. Unfortunately, I haven't bundled these all together as one group, simply because I want to give you the option of, whenever they're all loaded in, being able to select which color action you want to run through specifically. Okay, so menu in the top right, down to load actions, click on the action that you want to load and click load. A short caveat on that, what I would suggest is, just for organizational reasons and to stop yourself having an absolute minefield and headache, keep the gel light finisher to the end. Load it at the very end. Okay, so load the gel lighting blue red, then the green orange, then the turquoise and violet, and then load the gel finisher action. And you should have something like this at the end. The reason being is the gel lighting finisher, which I will show you later on in the video, is something that you can run at the end of running any of these other actions. So just keeping it at the end of the kind of stack that you have in your actions panel helps to mirror the workflow. Okay, so you would run any one of these actions and then at the end run the gel lighting finisher. Okay, so that's the actions loaded. The next thing is the gradient. Now, to be quite honest, I very rarely load gradients, and there's probably a much easier way to do this than the way I'm about to, but this is the only way I can figure out how to do it. Maybe you can double click on the gradients file, I don't know. But what I do is, down to the bottom of the layers panel, we've got the kind of yin yang symbol down here, which is our adjustment layers. And the second one up from the bottom is a gradient map. Click on that. Don't worry about what it's doing to the image itself. We're going to delete it anyway, so it doesn't matter. Click inside this gradient, and I just want to show you, these are the gradients that we're going to load up. Okay, these sort of last, what's that, 6. So same thing again, we've got a load button here. Just click load and look for the gel lighting gradients. Click on that and click load. Obviously I'm not going to do that because I have mine already loaded, but that's what you do. Okay, once you've done that, click OK, and we can just delete the gradient map adjustment layer. So click and drag it down to the trash can icon. Excuse me, I haven't been drinking, I swear. I promise. So now with the actions loaded and with the gradients loaded, what we need to do is create a selection around the subject. Okay, you can apply it to the overall scene, but there's 2 layers of highlights that are part of the action that will look a tad funky and possibly a bit keck if you don't create a selection first. So quickest way to make a selection, collect a selection, is the quick selection tool. Okay, and basically all I'm going to do is draw around her face and her hair and her body. And what you'll probably notice is at some point this is going to jump out and maybe select all the black around the background. Yep, and there we go. So if that happens, you can see that it's selected all this. I don't want that. Hold down the Alt key or Option on a Mac, and you'll notice that the plus icon that's inside my cursor at the minute will turn to a minus. And then you can draw over the area that you don't want included in the selection. I'm going to hold it down, just get that little bit. Okay, so once we've got that done, obviously if you're using Photoshop CC, you've got the select and mask option. You can click that and use that if you want. I absolutely bloody hate the thing, so I don't go near it. I much prefer the old refine edge that used to be there. So to get it, what you can do is click on select at the top of the screen, down to select and mask, but before you click on that, hold down the shift button on your keyboard and then click select and mask, and up comes the glorious old refine edge. The settings that you see in front of you are the ones that I find have worked best for the vast majority of cases, taking in skin, hair, the usual things that you'll find in a portrait, which is where this gel lighting effect usually gets applied. Obviously, depending on the resolution and the complexity of your image, these settings might need to change, but as a rough ballpark average, these seem to work quite well. So what I've got is Smart Radius is checked on, Radius is set to 1.8 pixels, then we've got Adjust Edge and the Smooth is set to 1, Feather is 0.5 pixels, Contrast is 29%, and Shift Edge is -2%. We've also got Decontaminate Colors checked on and the amount set to 100%. I have this set up to output to new layer with layer mask, and remember settings is checked on, which means every time I go into refine edge, these settings are there. So I don't need to input these or remember them every time. Just check on the remember settings and you're good to go. So I'm going to drag that out of the way just a little, and all it's a case of doing is clicking on this button if it's not already clicked. Now just make sure that you haven't got the erase refinement tool selected before you start drawing over it. You want to make sure it's the refine radius tool. Okay, so whenever it's selected, just draw over the edge of the selection that you made. Now it's not going to be exact, and I'm not going to spend loads of time getting this absolutely perfect, but that's done quite a good job automatically. Okay, so I'm just going to click OK on that. and because we've it set up to create a new layer and a layer mask, you're going to see that now in the layers panel. Okay, so we've got the background and it's hidden it, and we see our selection. Now there's some areas up here around the hair which I don't particularly like. It's chopped out too much of those, so I am going to very roughly paint those back in, and in order to do that we're going to be painting in the layer mask. Okay, the layer mask, in case you don't know, is just the icon to the right of your layer thumbnail. Okay, now your layers may look slightly different to mine, so at the very top of your layers panel you've got another flyout menu. If you want to click on that, go down to where you see panel options. You've got the option here to change the size of the thumbnails that are shown in your layer panel. Okay, I'm just going to change it to medium size for now. So a lot of people have it set up to look like that. Alright, and you've got your layer icon to the left, and this is your layer mask, the black and white one, to the right. I much prefer to go into the panel options and set my thumbnail size to none. The reason being is twofold. It has a little bit of an impact on the performance of your computer, because especially when you're running a document that's got a ton of layers, Photoshop's having to render out a thumbnail for each one of those. Perhaps they've changed how that works, but it used to have a bit of an impact on performance, so I just tend to keep it off. It also forces me to name the layers as well whenever I'm working with a document, because I don't have a thumbnail to rely on. So just a good bit of practice, and it's a good habit to get into, is just naming layers. So anyway, what we want to do is paint this section back in again. You can kind of see that checkerboard coming through in the hair. So select the layer mask. We're going to select a brush, so you can go over to the tools panel and hit the brush tool, or you can just press B on your keyboard. And the way a mask works is, in this case, anywhere that's white, that's what's going to be visible. Okay, so all of that is white. Anything that is transparent is essentially black. And if I hold down Alt and click on the layer mask, you'll see that. So that is the mask. Okay, this part that's slightly transparent, that means it's too dark, so we're going to use white to paint that back in. So just make sure we've got white selected. I've got a brush, and I've got the layer mask selected, and I can see that by the four corner kind of brackets that show up around it. And I'm just going to paint in white, and the reason why it's not showing up too great is because I have the opacity here set to 50, ramp that up to 100, and excuse the clicking of a mouse. I usually use a Wacom tablet, but it's attached to the workstation, and I am much too lazy to go and start setting it up and install drivers and all that great fun stuff that you have to do. So you're going to have to stick with hearing click, 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 click all the time. So that'll pretty much do. I could do a bit more down here in this section, but I'm going to leave it for now. That's entirely up to you how much you want to refine the selection that you're creating before you run the action. So that's it. Selection's made, and I'm happy with it. Once you're happy with yours, what you can do is right click on the layer mask and click apply layer mask. Now make sure you're absolutely 100% happy whenever you do that, because obviously I've nothing to paint white and black. If I paint white and black, it's literally painting white and black over the top of the image. I have no layer mask anymore. Okay, so that's once you're finished and you're absolutely happy with the selection, then click apply layer mask. The only thing we have left to do before running the action is rename this layer, and you rename it subject, all lowercase. That's it. Now, I know that took a lot longer than I anticipated and I intended it to, but that's just a few tips and tricks, and hopefully that helps you out just in general terms of making all sorts of selections. That refine edge settings that I have set up tend to work for the vast majority of things, so hopefully that's been of use to you, and it should definitely be of use when it comes to creating selections before running the action. Okay, so that's all that done. We're now just ready to select an action and run it. So entirely up to you which one you want to run, whether you want it to be the red and blue, the green and orange, the turquoise and violet. I'm going for the badness and the sheer hell of it. turquoise and violet. So what you need to do is click once on this arrow just to the left of the action itself to expand the folder. Click on the first step of the action and down to the bottom of the layers panel, click play. And let the magic happen. Now, depending on the performance and the power and the speed of your machine, this could take anywhere from 5 seconds to maybe half a minute. It shouldn't take any more than a minute. If it's taking longer than that, there's something wrong. So there we are. That's the rough, basic, no editing, no nothing, straight out of the box action. Okay, you could leave it at that if you're happy with it, and depending on the image that you use, you absolutely may be. Okay, so if you are, you can stop the video now and stop torturing yourself listening to this culty tongue of mine. Excuse me. So the next thing I'm going to do, if you do want to stick with me and listen some more, is just quickly go through what is in each of the folders and how you can go about editing the final result to get something a little better. Okay, so what we have, and to be quite honest, I put them in here and included them. I've yet to actually use any of them, but they're there in case you want them. We have a scene color adjustments folder at the top, which has different color lookup settings on it, okay? And with those and the basic adjustments, which is some color balance, gradient maps, levels, vibrance, just play about with those. You'll probably never use them, but they're there in case you want to experiment and see what happens. As with all layers in Photoshop, you can change the blending mode of them, you can change the opacity of them, and just toy about, have fun with those, explore those, see what they do. As I say, I've never used them yet, but they're there just in case. Okay. The main core and main focus of the actual action itself is these two layers here, color 1, excuse me again, and color 2. Honestly, I haven't been drinking, well, maybe just a couple. So I'm going to expand both of those and you'll see what we have. Underneath each of them we have 3 layers, okay? And I've tried to name those exactly the same, just one has color 1, the other has color 2. So you've got a color main, you've a color highlight 1 and a color highlight 2, and that exists in both of those color folders, okay? If you have a look at the turquoise, which for the most part is on this right hand side, I'm going to hide all of those. Okay, so that's just the violet. The first layer we have is the color main, okay, which adds some nice touches. The next two are the highlights, and you'll see what they do as I turn them on. Okay, again, you may be happy with how yours have turned out and you may not need to do anything with them, but if I zoom in just a little, I just want to show you something. Sometimes what will happen, depending on the resolution of the image, this line of the highlights can be extremely sharp. Okay, if that's the case, what you want to do is hide the layer, highlight 2 and 1, just to see which one is really causing the problems, and knock one of those on and off, and you can go, well, I'm fairly happy that that's a pretty soft edge. It's highlight 2 that has this sharp edge that I don't particularly like that much. Okay, so what you do to get rid of that, or at least smooth it out somewhat, is click on the layer mask of the highlight 2, okay, or the highlight 1, whichever one it is that you need to edit, and go up to filter, down to blur, and give it a bit of Gaussian blur, and you'll notice that's going to be really strong at 100 odd, so I'm going to drag that down a little. Play around with the Gaussian blur and see what looks good to you, okay? And the exact same for the color 1 highlight. You may want to do the same for the color 1 highlights as well. So just if you're getting a really harsh edge on some of the highlights, hide the highlight layers on and off to see which one's causing the major issue. Click on the layer mask of that particular highlight, up to filter, down to blur, and give it a bit of Gaussian blur. Okay. You can also add a bit of Gaussian blur to the color 1 main and the color 2 main layer mask. Now, this example's been quite kind to me, but what you'll sometimes get is like blotchiness. You can see a bit of it around the nose, and there's a bit up and around sort of above her eyebrow there. There's a bit of patchy, blotchy. It almost looks like a camo pattern. If you're getting that, again, I would suggest that'll be coming from the main layers. Okay, so go into the layer mask, up to filter, down to blur, Gaussian blur, and you'll want to be really subtle with that one, because as you can see with the blur set really high like that, it just blurs everything out. You'll lose all the actual impact on the contours of the face. So if I take this way down to like 3, you see the difference. You're picking up all these subtle highlights. If we go up to, say, let's go up to about 15, you can see it softens those out. Again, it softens it out too much in my opinion, so you'll want to play around with that. Okay, so if you're getting blotchiness, try adding a little blur to the color 2 main or color 1 main adjustment layer, or layer mask, sorry. Okay. The next thing you can look at doing is swap the order of these 2 layers about. So if I click and drag color 1 up above color 2, now just be careful when you're moving groups, because if I let go now, it'll actually go into the folder of group 2. What I want to do is go up ever so slightly more, and if you look carefully at the layer mask or the layer panel as I do this, see there's a double line there. There's a single line just above the white hand. Slide up slightly, that's a double line. That means that that group is now going between 2 groups. Okay, if it's a single line, it's going to drop it inside a particular group. Push up a little more until you get those 2 lines, and then you can let go. Okay, so you can test that out for yourself. So that's the original, and that's it moved. So it's just the subtle difference of, you know, the order of color 1 and color 2 layer groups do make a little bit of a difference. Okay, so you can toy around with that as well. Obviously, in any of these, if you want to change the color, it's as simple as clicking on these color squares. Okay, so say we want the turquoise to be, let's try for an orangey kind of yellow instead. So I'll double click, slide this down, we'll pick, say, something like that, and do the same for the color 2 highlight. We'll pick an orangey kind of vibe, and same with 1 highlight. Okay, and it's as simple as that, how to change the color. We could do the exact same with the lilac, just by double clicking, and we could make it blue or green or whatever color you want. Okay, so you can play around with those as well. I actually think the purple and the orange look quite good together as well. So again, you may be happy at that stage. If you are, great. If not, there's another little trick or tip, not a tick, that I like to do, and that is, you'll see it a lot of the times on some of the still photography, that it's quite subtle in terms of it only hits from the 2 sides, and the middle portion of the subject isn't really affected that much by the effect. If that's something you want to try out, again, what you can do is, I've got a blank layer mask set up on both of the colors. okay? And if you grab a brush, press B on the keyboard, and I have to do that a couple of times. I hate the way it cycles through the tools now whenever you press the button more than once. So that's my paintbrush. I'm going to select black this time because if you remember before, if you paint white onto a layer mask, it becomes visible. If you paint black, it will become invisible or transparent. So what I'm going to do is make sure that I've got a really soft brush. So I'm just going to right click here and make sure hardness is at 0. It certainly is. And I'm going to up the size of it a little. The way I do that is hit the square brackets key a few times. The right square brackets key increases the size of your brush, the left decreases it. Okay. And I don't want to just be painting 100% pure black and rubbing everything out. So I'm going to take the opacity of this down to say about 30%. And you can do that by just pressing the number 3 key on your keyboard. And I'm going to paint out. It's quite subtle, so you almost have to guess this in places. And again, this works a lot better if you have a Wacom tablet or a tablet of some sort with pressure sensitivity. You get a lot more control. Obviously, it can still be done with the mouse. And then what I just done there is select the layer mask of the color below it, paint out some more of that. Now, bear in mind this is only at 30%, so it's a very subtle effect, but you'll see what's happening there. And I can jump back and forward between the layer masks of color 1 and color 2. Painting in black to rub those sections out. Okay, so what that leaves it with is you've got the effect happening on the left and the right, and it's coming across the face ever so slightly, but the central portion is just back to being more of a standard skin tone. Okay, once you're done with that, or you don't need to do that at all if you don't want, click on the scene color adjustments if you're happy with the outcome, and we're going to run the gel lighting finisher. So same again, what we need to do is expand the group, select the first level of the action itself and click play. And this is a really subtle effect. Okay, it just adds an overall tone to everything that unifies it together and adds a secondary, or sorry, I should say a third skin tone. So if I open up that group, what we've got is a scene gradient, and if I hide that on off, you'll see how subtle it is. Okay, and you can obviously play around with the strength of it. I would never go that high, but that said, I think the 13%. You can click on the yin yang kind of icon to see what the gradient is. If you click inside this gradient, then it opens up the gradients editor, and you can edit some of these pointers to pull the orange down. It'll be really subtle, but you can have a play about with that to see what it does. The one that you'll get more benefit from is the skin third tone layer, and again it's just a gradient map. So same thing again, I'm just going to click on this icon, double click on it, click on the gradient, and it's really just affecting the highlights, the brightest highlights, and some of the highest midtones. Technically it's using a green channel from one of the earlier layers as a mask. So what I'm going to do is just pull the orange down slightly, and what you should see happening as I do that, the skin warming up a little. As I say, it's really subtle. Okay, but you can see it. If I click OK on that and I undo it, you'll see how subtle it is. So that's what we just done. If I undo, you can see it's slightly pinker, but more of a magenta kind of tone to the skin. And I'll redo it. So it just adds another color to it and a bit of contrast if you want it. You can obviously change that color. So if I take that orange I could change that to a blue, for example, and I'll do the same with the yellow, and you'll see what that does. Okay, so it allows you to add a very, very subtle third skin tone to your image. That's not something that you may always want, you may never need it, but it's there just in case you want to. And again, you can mess around with the strength and the opacity of that to see what kind of effects you're going to get. Okay, so you'll often find that on some of these gel photography shots as well, that there is a third tone in there a lot of the time. Just be careful when you're doing it. You can overdo it and you can make things look really garish and unnatural, and that's not really what you're going for. The goal with any of the actions that I create is, yes, they're high impact, but you don't want it just to look like something's being photoshopped all the time or photoshopped to death. Okay, it's you're never going to get the exact same appearance using a Photoshop action as you will by going out and spending money buying gels and a whole lighting setup and backdrops and all the rest. If you're looking to do it properly, by all means, that's just an investment that you're going to have to go into, and to do it properly and get it absolutely exact, that's what you'll have to do. A Photoshop action it's a much cheaper alternative to get a similar effect. It's not going to get you the exact same effect, but it's something similar, and I'm a firm believer that no matter how dramatic the effect or the action actually is, you should still be subtle while you're doing it. Things should never look blatantly photoshopped, unless you're obviously going for that look. But in terms of photography and using actions, I just believe that they should be a little more subtle. Okay, so bear that in mind. Play about with it, see what works. But I would always be quite subtle with that second effect. So anyway, there you go. That was, sorry, a lot longer than I hoped. But I hope that shows you a few of the different things that you can do with the dual lighting gel Photoshop action. Feel free to mess around, change the colors. There's loads of options in there for you. So play around. Just make sure that you've created a good selection at the start and that you're happy with it before you apply that actual layer mask and run the actions. And make sure that your image is of a large enough resolution. Don't go for anything less than, honestly, you could even come into problems if you're running an image that's 2500 pixels. I would try and stay in the minimum 3000 pixel dimension. So there you have it. That has covered absolutely everything, I think, and that took quite a bit longer than I had hoped. So apologies for keeping it, but hopefully that showed you a few tips and tricks and helps you get the most out of the actions that are included. If you have any questions at all before downloading or after downloading it, just drop me a message and I'll be more than happy to help out. Alright, so thanks again for sticking with it, and have fun, and I'll see you all soon. Cheers.